Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Sunday, July 20th, 2025, and on Sundays we talk about the purpose and meaning of life. Before we get started, I have to acknowledge up front it is our eldest son's birthday today. That's right, Ryan turns 36 years young. Apologize for stating your age on camera, Ryan, but nonetheless, he's blessed us with 36 years on this planet. Several of them wonderful, a few of them more of a challenge, but I kid. Anyway, happy birthday, Ryan. So let's get into it today. So in fact, we're going to be talking about honesty today and this week. And by the way, kidding is one way of masking honesty to some degree. So we have to be careful with our kidding. I know I'm guilty of sometimes kidding a little bit too much at times or stepping over the line, but part of that involves trying to have fun, trying to share some laughs, trying to hopefully use the kidding behavior as a way of drawing people together as opposed to putting them down. So that's something that you have to be really careful about when it comes to joking behavior. And again, there are some sort of cultural lines there that you shouldn't cross. And sometimes I've crossed them if I'm going to be totally honest with you. All right, so what do we mean then by honesty? That's probably the best place to start. So there are many different shades of meaning. Again, with most complex or interesting concepts, there isn't just one singular definition as such. But I think that the most common understanding is the notion of being truthful and forthright in one's communications, and then acting with integrity in terms of one's behavior. That's my simplified thought on the matter. So a person who's honest does not lie or deceive people in any way. And then their actions reflect their commitment to sort of moral uprightness and integrity, not taking advantage of others through deceit or other actions. So basically then, every time you knowingly do not tell the truth, you are being dishonest. Every time you, intentionally cheat, you are being dishonest. And notice I've used the adverbs knowingly and intentionally. And that's to emphasize your individual agency and the control that you have and our capacity for language and learning. I have to have some understanding of situations, the meaning of the different words that I'm using, and the principles that we derive from language in order to tell the truth and to act with honesty. So if I'm completely ignorant about a situation or just kind of lack the relevant information or knowledge, then it's not really fair to say I'm being dishonest in a specific situation. Instead, I might simply be ignorant or stupid or uninformed. But then I still have to ask whether my actions are in alignment with my understanding of the situation, and then being willing to acknowledge the reasons for doing what I've done. If I can do that, then I'm still being honest. Okay, and I actually find that just in general, for me, the bottom line in terms of being honest, it's much easier to be as truthful and transparent as I can in terms of what I say, and then trying to the best of my ability then to back that up in terms of what I actually do. I just find that that's much easier than lying. In other words, it takes a lot more energy, in my view, to manufacture and then maintain a lie or a facade in general. So instead, I've taken the issue, the old adage, quite literally, that honesty is the best policy. That's what we're taught when we're young. But I don't know that we always abide by that or believe that necessarily down the road. And we come up and we learn justifications for why we shouldn't necessarily always be completely honest and forthright. But more so than ever, especially in the last decade, I've hopefully committed to or come to a new understanding of what it really truly means to be honest in every understanding of every situation. Again, at least to the best of my ability. And you can do the same, of course. So most important, being honest, at least for me, is the only way to live in accordance with my understanding of my life mission and the purpose and meaning and the objectives that I care about in this lifetime. So that wasn't always the case. I could find reasons and justify being dishonest at earlier stages or different phases and different, or at least in certain aspects of my life. I've never been a fundamentally dishonest person. I could say that with all honesty. I've generally tried to tell the truth, but I can also say that I've made mistakes along the way, and more importantly, I've been dishonest at times. And I can't say I'm proud of that. So maybe I can state it this way. If your core mission in life requires that you lie or otherwise be dishonest, you might want to revisit that mission or how you've come to understand that or define that for yourselves. So to expand further then, any endeavors in life that require you to be purposefully, to be dishonest or deceitful, and especially if that also involves, and it usually does, hurting other people's, then surely that can't be the main reason for your existence. That can't be your main mission in life. So for example, I could never be a drug dealer, selling illicit drugs, street corner drugs, whatever, or someone who operates secretly beyond the letter of the law, and even worse, profits off of other people's pain and without regard for their well-being. And that's essentially what drug dealers do all the time. So if your profession or your business then requires that you deceive people or that you actively choose to do so, in any event, if that's your choice along the way, then there's a good chance that you might be part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So perhaps the best way to think about this, and simply put, is to imagine, in terms of your professional life or your business life, think about those times and the people that you've known over the years or that you've worked with or that you've hired and that you've come to trust quite implicitly. I had a mechanic, for example, in Toronto for about 20 years who looked after my vehicles and our family vehicles and so on, and was just as honest as the day was long and only did what was necessary. In fact, would say, hey, Joe, you don't need to do this or you don't need to do that. No, the brakes are fine. I don't know why they told you that. The brake pads are fine. Maybe in about 6 months or a year, but, again, let's wait until it's necessary. Saved me, honestly, thousands of dollars over the years. Why? Because he was honest. But then at the same time, he did exactly what he said he was going to do and explained why he was doing it. Okay. And so then I'd recommend him to others, and they had equally great experiences. Same thing with a local handyman that I hired at one point, just somebody that I knew through basketball. And then I got to know him, hired him for a job, and he was amazing. And he always did exactly what he said for the price that he said, and always did a great job too, and got the job done on time. It was so good, in fact, and helped me out on so many occasions when I lived in Toronto, that last year, I think it was actually the year before last, I just randomly, I hadn't seen the guy in well over 10 years, but I just randomly sent him an e-transfer at Christmas time, just to say, hey, I was thinking of you. Just wanted to send a quick thanks for all that you've done. So just a little bit of money, a little Christmas gift, shall we say. It's the least I could do for somebody who helped me out on so many occasions. So my point in sharing these two very simple examples is that these are the kind of people that we want to work with, that we want to be around, that we want to deal with. And I realized, of course, that that's the kind of person that I want to be as a professional in my life, right? Honest and forthright, and always, at least in my case, sharing the best knowledge I have available, the best opinions that I have with respect to what I know about different issues when I'm teaching, when I'm working with my students at the university, and when I'm trying to write and trying to publish my research. And then, by the way, I'm still going to screw up along the way. And if I do screw up, I'll, in terms of something that I've done or said in terms of my lectures, or I've messed up something on an exam or whatever, I try to take responsibility, apologize, acknowledge the error, and then try to fix my mistake. Not that difficult. And I think people respect you more when you do that, when you say, hey, my bad. Yeah, this is what I meant to say, or this is what I meant, and I didn't communicate that clearly. Something as simple as that. But people know they can trust me, in part because They know that when I don't know something also, I don't pretend that I do. I don't share, lies. I don't pretend to know something that I don't know, right? I'm not afraid to say then, hey, I don't know. Or usually what I say is something along the lines of, great question, but I'm afraid I don't have the answer. I haven't looked at the research on that particular topic. So let's take a look at that. Let me investigate further, and then we can discuss this down the road. Okay? What's more of a challenge, at least in my view, is trying to be honest all the time, not just at work. Again, assuming that you are, that is a sort of central mandate of yours in the work that you do, and, that you're honest with your boss or with your coworkers or with your clients and your, et cetera. Okay. But to me, what's even more challenging is to then try to be honest in every sphere of our lives, but especially in terms of our personal relationships. Say, really? Because here we have to consider then the context within which we're dealing with people on a regular day in, day out basis. Again, with whom and in what context specifically. So if I'm telling my children, for example, that there's a Santa Claus, when I know that obviously, spoiler alert, there isn't, then I'm not being completely honest, am I? I'm playing along, if you will, with the cultural script, which emphasizes a kind of literal deception. And yes, we did that with our children when they were younger. But if I'm also at the same time treating Santa Claus as kind of a metaphor for spreading joy and happiness to children all over the world, then it's still a fabrication, but it's obviously not one that's meant to intentionally hurt others. So there is some justification for this type of fabrication. I'm not saying it's the best way to go or that these are the cultural scripts we should continue to perpetuate forever, but I can also understand why there are these little exceptions, shall we say, within our cultural playbooks. But again, notice the key point there. I'm not trying to hurt others by doing so. But some would argue, yeah, but any type of deception is at some level hurtful of others. And I understand that and appreciate that. So there's some more nuance here, okay? And so if I'm responding then to a query when I'm asked about my opinion, this is probably the more common situation we confront. Then once again, you have to consider what's the context. I don't know that there's an absolutely best way to respond. In other words, if I'm going to be giving a totally honest answer, I have to think, well, is that going to be hurtful or harmful toward others? And if so, I might think about modifying my answer slightly, not because I'm trying to lie per se, but rather I'd rather bend my response in the direction of decency and kindness. Again, you don't have to lie, but you can think of more effective ways to respond without lying, without being dishonest. And another strategy, by the way, in this regard, consists of simply turning the tables and asking the person, what they think about the issue, about their own question, and then listening to their responses. You don't have to agree, but you can at least hear what they're saying, and you can at least acknowledge their perspective. And then again, see if there's a way that you might want to frame your response that's still honest and speaks to your truth, but without intentionally hurting and creating misery, shall we say. And besides that, you don't always even have to speak either, right? So you can practice being honest by being silent at times too, not answering a question that you feel is inappropriate. Again, not because you're trying to hide something or lie, but rather because you're under no obligation to talk about everything or offer every single opinion that you have, or especially if it's something about your own personal business, shall we say. So even, let me put it this way. Even though I'm a pretty open person in general, but as open as I am, I'm not going to tell you, the proverbial you, everything that I think and do, because there's a lot of aspects of my life that are indeed part of my, what we call private life, or things that I want to keep private, not in public, and not in the public realm. And it's not because I'm doing anything deceitful or dishonest or harmful, but simply because it's part of my daily routines, part of my private life, and not stuff that you need to really know about. Does that make sense? So, in other words, do you really need to know, for example, whether I sleep on my back or on my side? Do you need to know if I hang the toilet paper using the over or the under technique? I mean, I can tell you that, but why? Right? Or how often I tell my wife that I love her, or how much money I make. Thing is, if I had to tell you or someone else or a therapist or whomever these sorts of things, I'd prefer still to be just as honest and straightforward as possible. But these are things that we don't really need to necessarily have to tell people, do we? So the bottom line, it's not that we're perfect and that we're always perfectly honest, but I do think that that should be the overall aim. At least if we're hoping to live our best lives, be our best selves, and operate from a set of principles rooted in integrity. Sure, some lies are obviously much bigger or more serious than others. But even the little ones, the so-called white lies, start to chip away at our integrity, again, in my view. And I think every time we find ourselves then, for example, sneaking around or trying to hide what we're doing, we've entered onto that proverbial slippery slope of secrecy and cover-ups and lying. Moreover, every time we find ourselves doing that, I feel like I'm breaking the trust with others. I'm being dishonest. And here's the thing, I truly dislike being lied to. And since I don't like being lied to, or punched in the face for that matter, as a general principle, I figure it's best not to lie to others or punch them in the face. So it's really not that complicated, unless we choose to complicate things, usually with various kinds of self-centered or at times distorted reasoning where we're trying to protect ourselves. So there may certainly be some occasions and exceptions to the rule, shall we say, such as lying to protect the safety of one's own children. But these are few and far between. So I've been posed that question, well, would you lie to save the lives of your own children? I suppose that I might, if that's what would work in a particular situation, but I don't remember ever in my lifetime having to lie to protect my children. And that spans over 3 decades now. So yeah, I haven't actually been confronted with that in over 30 years of having children. All right, but I have lied in the past, if I'm being completely honest, for another reason or in another context, even as an adult, or tried to cover something up that I've done, especially when I was a younger adult. And so while I had my reasons at the time, looking back, I can say, with all honesty, that I'm not satisfied with the decision or any decision I ever made when I've had to be dishonest or deceitful, or I should say when I've chosen to be in my personal or professional life. And so that's where I'm starting this week with the Dr. J vlog series on the issue of honesty. So here's a simple example. I didn't get the vlog up today on time for its normally scheduled release time. I'll continue to try to get the vlogs up in the mornings, but I'm not always going to succeed. And that's what happened today. So I apologize. And there's still other times when I fall short, of course, in my own efforts and obligations. But honestly, it's just much easier for me to take responsibility and apologize if it's appropriate or if necessary. And as God and my family and my students and you folks out there are my witness, I'll always try to be as honest and forthright as I can be. And I find that that really helps in terms of my life's purpose and meaning. In other words, I can now then devote my energies to those things that I care most about and those people that I care most about, rather than wasting time and energy constructing lies, constructing the scaffolding, and sneaking around to try and hide what I'm doing. That to me is the waste of energy. So even the simplest things like one's phone. You have a phone, you have it password protected and all that? Probably. But here's the thing, since I don't do anything on my phone other than what I use it for and texting and this and that, and there's certain apps, etc., there's nothing that I'm doing that I'm lying about or being dishonest with in terms of covering up on my phone. And guess what? That means that I can then give my phone to my wife. She knows the password. She can look at it any time, or even to one of my sons or whomever. Okay? And then they can use my phone. And it's great because I'm not covering anything up. I'm not hiding anything with my phone. Now, I don't give them my burner phone, of course. No, I don't have a second phone. But the point is that the openness about my phone then facilitates productive uses of my phone, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might want to use it. If I'm driving in the car, I can, my wife can open up my phone and look up the directions or, whatever. She's not stuck. And I'm not worried, oh my God, what is she going to see on my phone? I'm an open book in that regard. So yeah, ask me and I'll loan you my phone. I got nothing to hide. Okay, well, there's much more to cover on the topic of honesty this week. So we'll continue with each daily vlog to look at honesty from different analytic and creative perspectives. So tomorrow we're going to actually tackle the issue of honesty in terms of mathematics and statistics. Well, once again, math and stats can be a lot of fun and quite entertaining if we're working with really interesting subject matter, like the extent to which people act honestly or dishonestly. Yeah, we've got some really interesting research and statistics on the subject. And so I'm going to share that with you tomorrow. So take care in the meantime, and as ever, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts and dole out hugs in abundance. Cheers.